Before we embark on today's profound journey through the sacred science of the ancient Egyptians, let me share a fundamental insight. What we consider modern discoveries about human energy systems may in fact be rediscoveries of knowledge that was once clearly understood by the temple initiates along the Nile. These masters encoded their understanding of the body's subtle architecture not merely in hieroglyphs, but in the very design of their temples, statues, and ritual practices. A living wisdom waiting to be reawakened within us. What if I told you that your body contains not one, but 7 distinct conscious entities, each with their own awareness and purpose? This is not New Age fantasy, but ancient Egyptian wisdom that saw the human form as a temple housing multiple layers of being. Within the sacred papyri and tomb walls of Egypt lies a sophisticated understanding of human anatomy that transcends the physical map of energetic pathways and centers that modern science is only beginning to recognize. When the ancient Egyptians depicted their gods and pharaohs in those distinctive poses, arms angled precisely, hands positioned deliberately, they weren't creating arbitrary artistic conventions. They were showing us how to activate and direct the subtle energies that flow through our very being. These weren't mere decorative illustrations, but precise technical manuals for working with the life force they called Ankh. Fellow traveler on the path of awakening, I invite you to journey with me today, beyond the veil of conventional understanding and into the sacred science of the Hermetic Body. You stand at the threshold of knowledge that was once reserved for those who had proven themselves worthy through years of temple initiation. The ancient Egyptians understood this intimately, encoding this wisdom in their art and architecture, their rituals and writings. Today your soul is called to remember what it once knew, that you are not simply inhabiting a body, but that you are an intricate energy system capable of extraordinary awareness and healing. The wisdom of the ancient Nile awaits your rediscovery. In the next half hour, we will decode the physiological mysteries preserved in Egyptian hieroglyphs and artifacts, revealing a sophisticated understanding of the body's subtle anatomy that predates all other known systems. You will discover how the Egyptians conceptualized not just one soul, but multiple conscious energy bodies that together form the complete human being. We will explore how these ancient insights parallel modern discoveries in bioenergetics and quantum healing. We'll examine the striking similarities between Egyptian energy centers and the chakra systems that emerged in later traditions. Most importantly, you will learn practical techniques derived directly from temple inscriptions, breathing methods, and sacred movements that you can use to activate and balance these centers in your own body. This knowledge was not theoretical for the Egyptians, but intensely practical, a living science of transformation. By the end of our journey, you will understand why the temple initiates mastery of these internal energies to be the foundation of all higher spiritual work, and how you can begin working with these same principles in your modern life. To truly understand the Egyptian conception of the subtle body, we must first recognize that they viewed life as a sacred force that circulated throughout all of creation. This wasn't an abstract philosophical concept, but a tangible energy they called Ankh, represented by the famous cross with a loop that appears in countless Egyptian artworks. When the gods are depicted holding the Ankh to the nose of the pharaoh, this wasn't merely symbolic. It represented the literal transmission of the breath of life, the subtle energy that animated the physical form. This understanding of life as breath, as energy, formed the foundation of their entire physiological system. Unlike our modern Western view that tends to see the body as a biological machine, the Egyptians recognized the human being as a complex, multi-layered entity. Their texts describe not just one soul, but several distinct aspects or bodies, each with its own function and characteristics. The physical body, called H, was just the densest manifestation. Beyond this was the Ka, the vital life force or etheric double. The Ba, similar to our concept of personality or soul. The Ankh, the immortal, transformed self. And several other aspects, including the shadow, the name, and the heart. What's remarkable is that the Egyptians didn't see these as abstract concepts, but as actual conscious entities that could be communicated with and even programmed. Temple initiates understood that by learning to consciously work with these subtle bodies, they could access higher knowledge and spiritual powers. This understanding was not limited to human beings. The temples themselves were designed to generate and channel subtle energies. The precise geometric proportions of Egyptian architecture, particularly the pyramids, were created to collect and focus these energies in specific ways. The first key revelation in understanding the Egyptian system is recognizing that they viewed the subtle energy centers of the body as conscious entities that could be directly addressed and worked with. Dr. Robert Gilbert, a modern researcher into subtle energies, points out that Egyptian initiates understood their subtle bodies as beings they could communicate with, not just as energy centers. This perspective changes everything about how we approach energy work. Rather than simply visualizing or manipulating abstract forces, the Egyptian approach involves establishing relationships with these conscious aspects of ourselves. When temple initiates performed specific movements or breath practices, they were engaging in a form of dialogue with these intelligent energy centers. The subtlety of this approach is reflected in their understanding of the Kasa, the etheric or life body. In Egyptian tombs, you'll find what's called a Ka-hole, a small opening in a false door through which this subtle body was meant to pass. This detail reveals the Egyptian belief that these energy bodies had specific properties and behaviors that could be worked with according to precise protocols. Modern bioenergetic research is beginning to catch up with this ancient understanding. Today's scientists are documenting the existence of biofield's electromagnetic patterns that extend beyond the physical body and influence its functioning. Research in fields like bioelectromagnetics is showing how these energy fields affect cellular behavior, tissue regeneration, and even mental states. What the Egyptians called the Ka body, modern researchers might describe as the electromagnetic field generated by the heart and nervous system. What they understood through direct perception, we're now measuring with sophisticated instruments. The convergence of these ancient and modern perspectives offers us an unprecedented opportunity to develop a complete science of subtle energy. As we venture deeper into the Egyptian mysteries, we encounter an understanding of the body's energy centers that predates the more familiar chakra system of Eastern traditions by thousands of years. While not identical to the chakra system, the Egyptian model shares the fundamental recognition of energy centers aligned along the spine, each associated with specific functions and aspects of consciousness. These energy centers were depicted in Egyptian art through specific symbols, colors, and deities. The god Thoth, for instance, was associated with the throat center and communication, while Horus was connected to the third eye and spiritual vision. The heart center, considered the seat of intelligence and feeling, unlike our modern brain-centered model, was under the protection of Isis. What makes the Egyptian system particularly fascinating is its sophistication regarding how these energy centers interconnect. They understood that the human energy field isn't simply a series of isolated points, but a complex network. Temple wall illustrations show figures in specific postures designed to create circuits of energy flow between these centers. Even more intriguing is the Egyptian understanding of how these energy centers could be influenced by external factors, including geometry. The precise proportions of their sacred spaces weren't arbitrary, but were designed to resonate with specific energy centers in the human body. When initiates performed rituals in these carefully designed spaces, The architecture itself amplified the energetic effects of their practices. This knowledge was practical and results-oriented. Research into pyramid energy has shown interesting effects on organic materials placed inside pyramid structures. Changes in preservation rates, water properties, and even seed germination. While much of this research remains outside mainstream science, it suggests that the Egyptian understanding of geometric forms as energy conductors may have had a solid foundation. Perhaps most profound is the Egyptian recognition that these energy centers linked the individual to cosmic forces. Each center was seen as a gateway to different dimensions of reality, allowing initiates to access knowledge beyond ordinary consciousness. By activating and harmonizing these centers, temple priests could allegedly perceive realities hidden from ordinary awareness. Let us now turn to how we can integrate this ancient wisdom into practical applications for modern life. The Egyptians left us precise instructions for working with our subtle anatomy instructions encoded in their art, architecture, and writings that we can now decode and apply. The foundation of Egyptian energy work was breath specifically. Conscious breathing techniques designed to activate and balance different energy centers. One such technique, which parallels the modern practice of deep, mindful breathing, involves slow inhalation through the nose, filling the lungs completely, followed by controlled exhalation. This isn't merely relaxation. It's a sophisticated method for increasing oxygen in the blood, activating brain functions, triggering immune responses, and balancing the polarities of energy in the body. Modern research confirms what the Egyptians knew: that controlled breathing affects not just our respiratory system, but our entire physiology, including heart rate, immune function, and nervous system balance. When practicing Egyptian breathing techniques, focus on creating what Dr. Mickey Mehta describes as the stream of breath, like the stream of relaxed reverse, relax in and relax out. This balanced approach, neither forcing nor restricting the breath, creates the optimal conditions for energy flow. Beyond breathing, the Egyptians developed specific movement practices, similar in some ways to modern Qigong exercises like Hasit, ringing the temple bell. These movements weren't arbitrary, but designed to send waves of vibrations deep into the tissues of your vital organs, stimulating energy flow and promoting internal balance. One such practice involves gentle torso rotations, while allowing your arms to swing naturally, creating a rhythmic tapping on the body that sends vibrations into the organs. This stimulates the movement of fluids and helps cleanse the body from within. The Egyptians understood that such movements activated what we now call the lymphatic system, a crucial part of both physical health and subtle energy flow. For optimal results, practice these techniques in a pyramid-shaped structure or model, which some research suggests may enhance their effectiveness. Even small pyramid models placed in meditation spaces have been reported to amplify energy work. While scientific validation of pyramid energy remains limited, many practitioners report noticeable effects when combining Egyptian energy practices with pyramid geometry. The key insight from Egyptian practice is that subtle energy work should never create stress. It should feel natural and harmonious. As Dr. Mehta advises regarding breathing practices, do not forget the relaxed rhythm of the reverse. That is the way your breath should be. This principle applies to all aspects of working with the Hermetic Body. When we step back and view the Egyptian understanding of the subtle body in its entirety, we recognize something profound. They were not merely describing energy systems, but outlining a complete technology of consciousness transformation. The ultimate goal wasn't simply health or well-being, though these were important, but spiritual enlightenment, and even transcendence of death itself. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, more accurately translated as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, wasn't about death at all, but about the journey of consciousness through various states and dimensions. The practices for working with subtle body energies were preparation for this greater journey. This perspective challenges our modern materialist paradigm, suggesting that consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but is a fundamental aspect of reality that interfaces with the physical through these subtle energy systems. The Egyptians saw humans not as isolated biological entities, but as dynamic energy processes intimately connected with the larger cosmos. Modern bioenergetic research is beginning to validate aspects of this ancient view. Studies in fields like psychoneuroimmunology reveal how consciousness affects physical health through measurable changes in immune function, inflammation, and cell repair. The emerging field of biofield science is documenting the electromagnetic and subtle energy components that extend beyond our physical boundaries. What's emerging is a unified science that bridges ancient wisdom and cutting-edge research that Ether 369 describes as Lanichanta Sat. Ancient wisdom combines with modern science, merging Egypt's energies and sunlight's quantum properties to create positive well-being. This integration offers a path forward that honors both empirical research and experiential wisdom. Perhaps most significantly, this transcendent perspective reveals that our individual healing and transformation contribute to collective evolution. By working consciously with our subtle anatomy, we're not merely improving our personal well-being, but participating in humanity's broader awakening. As the Egyptians understood, the microcosm and macrocosm mirror each other. Personal transformation affects the whole. As our journey through the Hermetic Body reaches its culmination, I extend to you an invitation not just to intellectual understanding, but to embody practice of this ancient wisdom. The Egyptian initiates knew that true knowledge wasn't merely conceptual, but experiential, something to be lived and realized through consistent work with these subtle energies. When you stand before a mirror and practice the breathing techniques we've explored, you're not just performing an exercise. You're participating in a tradition of sacred science that spans millennia. With each conscious breath, you're reawakening what the Egyptians called the Ka, the vital energy body that connects you to the life force flowing through all creation. As you move through the postures derived from temple walls, you're not merely stretching muscles, but activating energy pathways that link your individual consciousness to cosmic intelligence. These aren't metaphors or poetic flourishes. They're practical descriptions of experiences that await your direct perception. Remember that the hieroglyph for the Ankh, the symbol of life itself, depicts a key. This is no coincidence. The practices we've explored are keys that unlock doors within your own subtle anatomy, opening pathways to dimensions of awareness that transcend ordinary consciousness. The ancient Egyptians believed that by mastering these internal energies, one could achieve what they called coming forth by day, the ability to navigate consciously through all states of being, including those beyond physical existence. This wasn't fantasy, but the culmination of precise, systematic work with the subtle body. Tonight, as you rest upon your pillow, I invite you to place your attention at the center of your chest, which the Egyptians recognized as the seat of intelligence and feeling, and to breathe consciously into this space. Feel the energy gathering there, pulsing with each heartbeat. This simple practice begins the reawakening of your hermetic body, the temple of transformation that you already are. And when next we meet on this journey beyond the veil, we will venture further into the Egyptian mysteries, exploring how these energy practices connect to the stars themselves, as the famous Hermetic axiom states, "As above, so below, as within, so without." Until then, may the wisdom of the ancients illuminate your path.